So today we're going to look at a video based on one of my hypotheses rather than a viewer, and that is upsets in the first game week of a season. Now, this is something that I've been looking at for a while, but I haven't really had the sort of data set to test it. And using CgmBet, I now have. And so, what we're going to look at in this video is, yeah, as I said, upsets in the first game week of the season. So whether it be a home upset or an away upset, we're going to be looking at favourites. We're going to look at the odds of those favourites and how often those odds will have been upset over the last 5 seasons in the top European leagues. So the leagues that are going to start this weekend, basically. And we get some really interesting results. And for each league, I've sculpted its own filter. So there's not a one-size-fits-all. So I've gone through all of the leagues that are starting this weekend. Well, I say all of them, the main EFIGS leagues, and then we've got some, the second league in Spain, so the Segunda, Italy, Serie B. We've got the Netherlands, a couple of Portugal leagues, the Premier League, of course. And so each of them, I've tweaked them slightly to give us different odds that we're looking at. And we've got some really interesting results. So on top of that, after you've seen the filters that I've built, you'll see that I've also created my own shortlist, added some of the softer filters to it to do with what I think might happen, so the sort of intuitive experience. And that's come up with a shortlist for this weekend of what I think are good value bets. Now, they're not tips, they're what I think I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I'm not telling you to bet money on them. And this is the only time really that I'll show tips, what people could perceive as tips in a video, because I don't want people blindly following them. But just to give you context, that's why they're there. So let's jump into the video. So we're going to head over again to the upsets module, but at least we're using it for what it's meant to be used for. This time we are actually looking for upsets. And I've done this for every single league that starts next weekend, so all the major leagues. I'm going to show you a sample of what I've done, and then we'll look at the results after. So let's start with the Premier League, the one that I imagine many of you will be interested in. And I did manage to find a filter that would work quite nicely for the opening game of the season in the Premier League. So what have we done? We've done English Premier League, favourite not won. So that's important to just sort of wrap your head around what we're doing here. We're looking down here, the results and the market stats that we're going to be looking at are based on a market that suggests the favourite has not won the game in the past 5 years. That will show you what's going on. So we want the odds for the favourite for the Premier League to have been between 1, which basically means it can be as low as possible, and 2.10. Now, I haven't just sort of dreamt these up. I've gone through and filtered and done the old trial and error to find out what was the best range, and this is what I've stumbled across. So if we look at odds for the favourite, so it doesn't have to be a home favourite, just the favourite in the fixture to between 1 and 2.10. We want to look from 2017-18, which gives us 5 seasons worth of data, and we only want to look at games between round 1 and 1 because we're just looking at the opening game of the season. And we'll refresh that filter and see what we get. So obviously you're not going to get a huge amount of games because we're only looking at week 1 for the last 5 seasons. So yeah, let's have a look. And we get 60 matches, as you can see. So 60 matches, and here what this means is total number of possible defined upsets 45. So that means out of those 60 matches, which were first week fixtures, 45 of them had a favourite between 1 and 2.10. What we've got here for the Premier League over the last 5 seasons, if we put these odds in, we can see this is what I'm interested in. An away, 44.4% of the matches, so 20 out of those qualifying 45 matches ended with an away win. So in the last 5 seasons in the Premier League, for the first fixture of that season, there were 45 qualifying games where the odds for the favourite were between 1 and 2.10. It didn't have to be a home favourite, just there was a favourite in the match, in the betting odds. When such a favourite did exist, the away team won 44% of the time. And that gave us a yield of 33.56%. See on the right hand side, what it will do here for you is show you those matches. Games that met the criteria is yellow, that's the 45 games. Scheduled games, that's irrelevant. Played games that met the defined criteria and were upsets. So that's according to this model. That's not going to be all away wins. That'll be away wins and draws. We can see down here Crystal Palace Huddersfield. So that ended up with a Huddersfield win, even though the home team was 1.79 favourite. Chelsea Burnley 3-2, even though a very short favourite. West Ham Newcastle, Tottenham Everton. So you can see where I'm going with that. And what we're saying is, if those odds are there, we've got a 33.5% yield over the past 5 seasons. One of the leagues that I am interested in is Bundesliga. This Bundesliga actually is interesting that with similar odds, I'll show you this next week because the Bundesliga doesn't start until a week later. Similar sort of odds setup. It's actually good value to back the home team to win the game rather than the away team. Then there's a big yield on the home favourite. So let's skip over to the Liga and see what it looks like there. Spanish Primera Division. We want the same time frame, still only the first game of the season. And what I did was use the Premier League as a base and then tweak it up and down to see what worked for the Liga. The Liga was an interesting one because we were looking at we ended up finding value in draws for the first game rather than first game of the season rather than away wins. So we ended up at 1.2 games between 1.20 and 2.70. As you can see, it returned us a profit on draws. So look at that for a split. There were 60 games again, same number of teams as are in the Premier League, so the same number of fixtures. Possible defined upsets 54 because it's quite a wide range, isn't it? 120 and 270, you're going to get a lot of favourites in there. And look at the amount of upsets. And if you look at the market stats, you can see that the 31.72% ROI on betting on draws in these instances where there's a favourite between 120 and 270. So you can see that with the away wins, we were looking at 18 draws as well. So, but for the draws in particular, looking at an average win odd of 3.95, which is super high, which is why I've always loved betting on draws. And the average odds overall 3.98. So now let's have a look at the Netherlands. Was the next one I wanted to look at. And this one returned a really healthy return or potential yield. So if we look at 170 and 240, and if we look at the market stats, which I'm more interested in, you can see the away wins, 16 out of those 27 qualifying games were away wins with a 62.7% yield. Obviously huge. So we're looking at odds of 2.75, averaging the winners 3.12 overall. So you can see they're not massive underdogs because the average odds are 2.75, but they're still not favourites because it's favourite not won. So we're looking at odds of 2.75, 62.7%, which is again a really interesting angle to follow. So I skipped over to the upcoming module in CgmBet, which you'll have seen me use before, which is this one. Upcoming, and I put in the leagues that we wanted and the odds that we wanted and exported anything that was coming up in the next 7 days. And that's where I started filtering it a little bit more, and you'll see all this yellow and black. So I've gone through them and highlighted anything that is in our range, bold, and I'll show you why. So I went through and filtered everything that I decided that for the away wins I wanted. The bet was on the away wins. This was the range. I decided that ideally I wanted a home favourite for these away wins. This is for my personal preference. So I've disregarded, even though it's highlighted in the first instance because it qualifies, I've disregarded Man City. So the range that we use between 1 and 2.10, they're highlighted if there is a favourite in that range. So all of these ones aren't because the favourite here is 2.7, so it's out of our range. And as you can see, I've highlighted them and I've bolded the ones that I'm particularly interested in. So I'm still using a bit of intuition here. I'm taking the data as it is from the last 5 years and using my filters, but then I'm also adding a layer on top to use my own intuition and sort of experience to decide which ones I want to shortlist. It's heavily based on what's come out of CgmBet, and then I'm applying my own filter on top of that with the softer stuff. So I've done that for every single league based on its own criteria. What I've done then is filter them and create a list of my own for what I think would be interesting for the weekend. And as you can see, most of them are going to be away wins. We've got a couple of draws. We've got draws in Spain, Almeria Vallecano and Sociedad Girona, Villarreal Betis, Getafe Barcelona and Atletico Granada. And then we've got our away win. I mean, with the draws, I've sort of used my discretion and decided to go for the higher odds, basically. If the data fits multiple selections, I'm going to look for the best value, and that's with the higher odds. But yeah, this is my shortlist for the coming weekend. So I hope you enjoyed that. Some games to look out for at the weekend. I'm not suggesting you put money on them. You can just monitor them the same way as I will be. So they're not tips, but they are a glimpse into how I shortlist matches when I'm testing new strategies. And it's what I'm going to be looking at this weekend. If you want to get involved with CgmBet, the link is still in the description for a discounted membership. You can also sign up to the Value Toolkit that I produce, which should come into its own now that the leagues are starting again this summer. I'd suggest using it along with the toolkit, really, because you can easily copy and paste the data into it and get the value add selections. If you don't want to spend any money at all, if you could like and subscribe, it does me a massive favour. I know it's long, it's cheesy and it sounds like cliche, but it really does help. So, just be nice. Thanks and enjoy the football coming up.